ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती वृत्ताश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति निश्चिति। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले वयं रूपकडामह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणि निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशकारिणि। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 29, that is entitled The Talks Between Narada and King Prachina Parikshit. Just give me a minute. So there is a frank discussion now, which is happening between Narad Muni and Prachina Parikshit, where Narad Muni is going to explain all the terminologies in detail in this particular chapter. So we come to text 6. Sakhaya indriyagana ज्ञानं कर्म च यत्कृतं सख्यस्तद्वृत्तयः प्राणः पञ्चवृत्तेर्यथो रगः. Translation.
The five working senses and the five senses that acquire knowledge are all male friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagements of the senses are known as girlfriends, and the serpent, which was described as having five heads, is the life air acting within the five circulatory processes. Purport. कृष्ण बहिर्मुखा हना भोग वांछा करे निकटस्था माया तारे झपटी आधरे प्रेम विवर्त. Because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore the instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends. Sometimes, because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers in on the subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the gross body. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 15.10, Utkramantam sitam va api bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudananu pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The living entities are merged into the air of life, which acts in different ways for circulation. There is prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the life air functions in this fivefold way, it is compared to the five-hooded serpent. The soul passes through the Kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to Urag, the serpent. Panchavritti is the desire to satisfy the senses, attracted by five sense objects, namely form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Narad Muni describes that the five working senses, Sakhaya Indriya Gana, and the five senses that acquiring knowledge, Karmendriya and Gyanendriya, they are all the male friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses to acquire knowledge and engage in activity. Correct? Gyanendriya and Karmendriya. Engagement of the senses are known as girlfriends. What a powerful statement it is. Right. So, again, whenever you take a statement here, it is allegorical. And, and the Uraga, the five headed senses, is the five life airs, like Prana, Apana, Udana, Vyana, and Samana. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that uh, Krishna Bahirmukh, that a living entity desires to enjoy, and then he is dressed with the gross and material body. Right. Somebody is desiring to enjoy, to act in a drama, he will be dressed differently. Somebody, wants to become say, some Daku in the drama. Then he's all, the attire will be changed. He will be given some, big mustache and big beard, having some weapons in the hand. So, based on the role that a person wants to play, he will be dressed accordingly. Now, the living entity, which is spiritual in nature, wants to play the material roles, and therefore the material body is awarded to living entity. It is just like the mother dressing the child, saying that "Beta kya banna chahte ho?" And the beta says that I want to become Matsya Avatar. And then the child is given a dress of a Matsya Avatar kind of a thing. So similarly, the Lord also gives this dress of gross body and the subtle body. But due to excessive sinful activities, sometimes gross body is taken away, and the living entity remains only with the subtle body, and that is considered as a very, very ghostly existence. So yesterday we have seen what the ghost is. Ghost is one who is not having the gross body but has only subtle body, and such entities are very difficult for those who are having gross bodies because they will try to fulfill their desires through another person's gross body, right? So somebody has a desire. Desire is stored in the subtle body, right? But the actual experience of the desire cannot happen without gross body. So somebody likes gulab jam. But now to taste the gulab jam, to go near gulab jam, pick up the gulab jam and place it in the mouth and chew the gulab jam, all that happens because of the gross body. Ghosts are why they are very always extremely frustrated because they have huge desires, but there is no instrument to fulfill those desires. And therefore, such people try to haunt somebody's gross body and try to fulfill their desires through these gross bodies. It is commonly seen, quite well recorded that somebody, who has a gross body and suddenly this, a different boy, maybe the Kannada boy started speaking some Spanish language. Why? Because the instrument, that is tongue, is used by something different. And then Prabhupada says, Vimudhana anupashyanti. This cannot be understood by those who are not in the knowledge, but it is very clear. Utkramantam sitam vapi punjanam va gunanvitam. And then Uraga, snake. So the five-hooded snake, that is the Panchaprana is considered to be a five-hooded snake. Panchavritti is considered to be getting attracted to the five types of sense objects. And engagement with the sense object for the senses is very delighting to the senses and the illusioned soul, but it is actually binding if it is not used in the service of the Lord. So this is how Narad Muni is explaining this part. Text 7. Brihad balam mano vidyat ubhayendriyanayakam Panchala Pancha Vishaya Yadmadde Navakham
Trans-
Puram. Translation?
Translation: The 11th attendant, who is the commander of the others, is known as the mind. He is the leader of the senses both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of work. The Panchala kingdom is that atmosphere in which the five sense objects are enjoyed. Within that Panchala kingdom is a city of the body which has 9 gates. Purport: the mind is the center of all activities and is described here as Brahadabala, very powerful. To get out of the clutches of Maya, material existence, one has to control his mind. According to training, the mind is the friend and the enemy of the living entity. If one gets a good manager, his estate is very nicely managed. But if the manager is a thief, his estate is spoiled. Similarly, in his material, conditional existence, the living entity gives power of attorney to his mind. As such, he is liable to be misdirected by his mind into enjoying sense objects. Shri Ambarish Maharaj therefore first engaged his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. Cha vai manah Krishna padar vinadayoho. When the mind is engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, the senses are controlled. This system of control is called yama, and this means subduing the senses. One who can subdue the senses is called a Goswami, but one who cannot control the mind is called Godasha. The mind directs the activities of the senses, which are expressed through different outlets, as described in the next verse. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Brihat Balam Mano Vidyat. The 11th attendant, 5 plus 5, they are the knowledge acquiring senses, working senses. The 11th attendant to the Puranjani, is the mind, which is commander of all the senses. And he is the leader of the senses, both in acquisition of the knowledge and performance of the work. Right. Performance of the work is Karmendriya. Acquisition of the knowledge is Jnanendriya. And both of them, the leader is mind, which is extremely strong. Right. And the Panchala kingdom is the five sense objects which are to be enjoyed, the atmosphere in which the five sense objects are enjoyed, Kshetra. And there is a city of 9 gates, that is Navakham. So Navadware Pure Dehi Navakham Puram. Kham means the apertures, Chidra. So Navakham. So with the 9 holes, city of the 9 gates. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the mind is the center of all activities, and therefore it is described as Brihat Bala. Even Marathi, there is a beautiful Abhanga which says, Tukaram Maharaj says this, Mana karare prasanna, sarva siddhi che karana. Right. So this is Mana karare prasanna. Evam prasanna manaso. Or, no, not that, Evam prasanna manaso. Chitatmanah prashantasya paramatma samahitah. One who conquers the mind, it is as good as the super soul is just reached. So the mind is, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Mind is extremely powerful. And that's why Maharaj Ambarish, he engaged his mind in the service of the Lord. Right. So we have to do things mindfully. Right. What it means is we have to engage mindfully in devotional service. Not that, of course, I am just speaking for my fallen self. 16 rounds का पाटी डाल दिया, मराठीमध्ये विषय ना पाट्या टाकणे, like that. इसका रीडिंग हो गया, हियरिंग का हियरिंग हो गया. Not like that. We have to engage our mind. We have to do it mindfully. Right. So therefore, mind is called as Brihat Bala and is the friend and enemy of the living entity. Bhagavad Gita says this. Uddharayet atmanam 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 navasadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva rupura atmanah atmaiva hi atmano bandhur. So is the friend or the enemy? Because Prabhupada says if one gets a very good manager, one's estate will be managed very nicely. And it's one such amazing lifetime project I want some devotees to take up, is that if we can just relate when Srila Prabhupada wrote the purport and what was the happening in the life of Srila Prabhupada in ISKCON, I mean, is that, so 1972, Prabhupada writing this purport and what was happening around that period in ISKCON, which letters Prabhupada was receiving, and Prabhupada must have received a letter that, the Juhu property is very ill managed or something like that. And Prabhupada is writing these statements here. So that's why Srila Prabhupada books are very, very lively, because they are written while practicing the worldwide expansion of Krishna consciousness. So we have to really find out when this purport was written, and what was the Prabhupada letters those days were happening that particular day. And that thread one will see all through. That will be a phenomenal study. If we can form a group to do that, that will be a really big study and big contribution to devotee community. That why Srila Prabhupada wrote this with reference to what's happening in ISKCON around that time. So Atmaiva hi Atmano Bandhur, Atmaiva Ripuratmanah. And therefore Maharaj Ambarish example is very appropriate because he engaged his mind, Savai Mana Krishna Padarvindu. Prabhupada writes, mind becomes the power of attorney. Literally, whatever mind says, the living entity foolishly says yes, 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 yes. And therefore, mind has to be controlled. And when the mind is controlled, automatically the senses will also be controlled. When the mind is engaged in the meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, what is the meaning of that? Being engaged in the service of the Lord, then automatically, the control of the mind, yama, automatically happens. And such people are called as Goswami, controller of the mind. Otherwise, they are Godas. So, mind will direct activities of the senses, right, through the different holes in the body. And therefore, mind has to be controlled. And one powerful way to control the mind is, of course, the Mahamantra, chanting of the holy names. And another way is also one can control the breath, right? So, controlling the breath also, being just aware of the things and controlling the breath, mindfulness, those also help. Of course, these are very temporary helps. Ultimate help is by chanting the holy names. That is Maha Mantra. Manatrayate iti mantra. Text 8. Akshaninaasike karne mukham shishnam gudavidi dve dve dvarau bahiryati tadindriya yattat indriya sanyutah. Translation.
The eyes, nostrils, and ears are pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genitals, and rectum are also different gates. Being placed into a body having these 9 gates, the living entity acts externally in the material world and enjoys sense objects like form and taste. Purport: not being aware of his spiritual position, the living entity directed by the mind goes out through the 9 gates to enjoy material objects. Because of long association with material objects, he forgets his real spiritual activities and he is thus misled. The entire world is going on being misled by so-called leaders like scientists and philosophers who have no knowledge of the spirit soul. Thus, the conditioned soul becomes more and more entangled.
Yeah. So these are the 9 gates, Akshani, Nasike, Karna. We have seen this. And the living entity goes out of these 9 gates and try to be engaged in form, taste, sound, Shabda, Rasa, Sparsha, Gandha, and these 5 Tanmatras. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the living entity forgets his eternal identity and thus he goes out, goes out by this gate. So what this means by going out? Going out means one gets distracted. Okay, this is very important. What is the meaning of going out? Soul is not going to leave the body. But through the mind, sometimes we get just hooked to some podcast and 2 hours will go, right? People will get hooked to something like today, some match is there. People will be hooked to the match. 3 hours will go in that. So what happens? So we have to watch where our attention is flowing. Sometimes we get hooked to, I remember 2023, 24, the attack on Israel. I was so hooked to that. It took me a long time to come out of, the information and what's happening. And, it was such a terrible attack had happened. So, of course, one has to be socially aware. One has to be politically alert. At the same time, being in the name of alert and aware, one should be also aware that one's attention, where it is going. So going out of the body means losing one's attention. And modern economy is all attention economy. Attention economy means, TikTok is TikTok simply because they are capturing that attention of billions of people for, literally 10 hours a day, 5 hours a day, so on and so forth. So we have to be aware of the distractions, and that is possible when we are aware of the rarity of the human form of life, and and how we are actually slipping this opportunity from our hands. Of course, that doesn't mean that devotee leads a life which is like always very scared, and that is not the point. But the point is, one has to be aware of where the attention is flowing. That is the meaning of going out in that particular gate. Text 9. अक्षिणीनासिके हास्यम् इति पञ्चपुरकृता दक्षिणः कर्ण उत्तराच्चोत्तरस्मृतः पश्चिमे इत्यधो द्वारौ गुदौ शिष्णम् इहोच्यते. Translation.
Two eyes, two nostrils, and a mouth, altogether five, are situated in the front. The right ear is accepted as the southern gate, and the left ear is the northern gate. The two holes or gates situated in the west are known as the rectum and genital organs. Purport. Of all sides, the eastern is considered most important primarily because the sun rises from that direction. The gates on the eastern side, the eyes, nose, and mouth, are thus very important gates in the body.
Yeah. So now where the gates are being placed, that is the description Narad Muni is giving to Prachina Parishad. So we know that body is also known as Dakshina and Uttara. The part above the belly, Nabhi, is called as Uttara part of the body. And therefore what we wear on the top is called as Uttari, right? Why Uttari? Because it is covering the Uttar part of the body. And whereas the something below the waist, below the Nabhi, is considered as the Dakshin part of the body. So Dakshin means, going south. South is not for South India. Okay. South is the direction of Yamaraj. And therefore, you must have heard these words, huh? The market going southern, and so that is typically be considered as entire India is the eastern direction. Okay. So this is the Dakshin and Uttar of the body. So east is very important. Eastern direction is very important because the sun rises, that is the sun of the knowledge, spiritual knowledge rises on the east, and therefore eastern direction is very important. What that also means is anything engaged in the service of the Lord becomes eastern direction, right? It is not that the eastern direction sun rises. No, wherever the sun rises becomes east. Okay, na? The sun, you can freely choose wherever he wants to rise. Wherever. Actually, I had seen that, Eastern is not just one point. It is a realm of, it's like an arc across the year. Literally, you will see the position of the sun changing almost by, you can see from your one window to another window, the position of the sunrise is changing. So wherever the sun rises is the Eastern. Similarly, wherever there is the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, that becomes Eastern direction. Text 10. खद्योता आविर्मुखी चात्रनेत्रे एकत्र निर्मिते रूपं विभ्राजितं ताभ्यां विचष्टे चक्षुषेश्वरः. Translation.
Should I take it, Prabhuji?
Yeah, please.
Translation. The two gates named Khadyota and Avirmukhi, which have been spoken of, are the two eyes side by side in one place. The town named Viparajita should be understood as form. In this way, the two eyes are always engaged in seeing different kinds of forms. Purport. The two eyes are attracted by brilliant things like light. Sometimes we find that little insects are attracted by the brightness of fire and thus enter into it. Similarly, the two eyes of the living entity are attracted by bright and beautiful forms. They are entangled in these forms exactly as the insect becomes attracted to fire.
So now here, the gates will be more elaborately explained. Okay, the first begins with Akshini, and therefore we begin with the eyes. Khadyota and Avirmukhi, these are the which have been spoken here are the two eyes side by side in one place, right? And they go out through this eyes. This, the Puranjan or Puranjani goes out to a place called as Vibrajita, which is understood to be the form. What that means is the eyes get attracted to the form, right? And thus we are attached to seeing different types of the forms. So in the Purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the eyes are always attracted by the brightness. And brightness doesn't mean just the brightness of the light. Brightness also means the brightness of the form, some very beautiful forms. An entire cinema industry is based on this particular aspect. Show some nice forms and people get attracted. In fact, cinema is nothing but just the forms. It's an illusion being created on the screen. And getting different kinds of forms, they are entangled in these forms exactly as the insect becomes attracted to the fire. So, so just like the insect gets attracted to the fire just to get burnt by the fire, similarly, eyes may get attracted to different types of forms, and therefore it is important to control the travel of Puranjan through these two gates, Khadyota and Avirmukhi. Now, the next verse talks about next two gates. नलिनी नालिनी नासे गंधः सौरभ उच्यते घ्राणो वधूते मुख्यासं विपणो वाग्रस वित्रसः. Translation.
The two doors, Prabhuji, the two doors named Nalini and Nalini should be known as the two nostrils, and the city named Saurabha represents aroma. The companion spoken of as Avdhuta is the sense of smell. The door called Mukhya is the mouth, and Vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasadnya is the sense of taste. The word Avdhuta means most free. A person is not under the rules and regulations of any injunctions when he has attained the stage of Avdhuta. In other words, he can act as he likes. This Avdhut stage is exactly like air which does not care for any obstruction. In Bhagavad Gita 6.34, it is said, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramathi bala vruddhrudam tasyaham nigraham manne vayoriva sadushkaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it seems to me more difficult than controlling the wind. Just as the air or wind cannot be checked by anyone, the two nostrils situated in one place enjoy the sense of smell without impediment. When the tongue is present, the mouth continually tastes all kinds of relishable food stuff. Thank you.
Now the next two gates, next two doors are Nalini, Nalini. So these are Nalini and Nalini. So these are the to inhale and exhale, right? So Khadyota was the left eye and Avirmukhi was the right eye, to be more precise. And here now Nalini and Nalini, to inhale and exhale and smell, they go to the city of Saurabha, and through the senses, that is Avadhuta, that is the nose, right? In the 25th chapter, this is very elaborately explained in the City of Nine Gates. 4.25.45 to 55. These 10 verses are describing all these City of Nine Gates in great detail. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, and then there is Mukhya, it's the mouth, and then Vipana, the faculty of the speech, and Rasa, that is the taste. So mouth has two functions, to speak and to taste. And that is why this particular mouth. So the word Avadhut, Srila Prabhupada explains in purport, means most free. A person who is not under rules and regulations is called as Avadhut. And Nityanand Prabhu was such Avadhut. right? Avadhuta Nityananda. So it is so it's called as Avadhut, spiritually completely free to give Krishna consciousness to anyone and everyone. Patra na dekhi. Right. So, but here it is used in a little negative sense, Avadhut. But Avadhut state is exactly like air, which does not care for the obstructions which can flow anywhere and everywhere. Right. And then there is Srila Prabhupada mentions about the mouth, which is especially used for speech and different types of tastes. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you,
Jai.
Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Thank you.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavad Pranam.
Thank you, Prabhuji.